Welcome to the Fridays with Larry podcast. I'm Larry Lannon. This podcast is sponsored by Citizens State Bank. Learn more about the business and personal banking options at mycsbin.com/Larry. Or stop by their Fishers branch at the Thomas A. Weaver Municipal Complex. Citizens State Bank, member FDIC, and an equal housing lender. It's Fridays with Larry, and I am Larry. I thank you for joining me again. We've seen a slow increase in our audience. I appreciate that. I appreciate you watching, listening. If you've been here before, thanks for coming back. If it's your first time, welcome. We hope you stay with us each week as I just talk about what's going on in Fishers, try to feature a guest as often as I can. Look at the past week here in Fishers, because today is February the 6th. 2 words, Hailey Buzbee. A very sad story. But I think that if there's a silver lining to the death of this tragic death of this wonderful young lady, is what we have seen with the Fishers community. We have come together. We've surrounded her family, I think, with love and support, letting them know that we are here for them. You know, it's a difficult story, but I think it needs to be told, and I think we can learn from it, and that's where I'm going to go with a few comments here. I want to let everyone know that I have made a decision. And every news organization has to make decisions like this. And I'm a one-man band. I make my own decisions. So I'm totally accountable for what I decide to do. But I made a decision, and here it is. On the day that it was announced, Mayor Fadness announced that Hailey Buzbee was most likely deceased. The chief of police, Ed Gephardt, announced the name and age of the person that's being held in custody in connection with her disappearance. He has not been charged with murder as of the time we record this, but he's facing criminal charges which aren't related to her disappearance. I have made the decision. I did mention his name, that one story, so people know who he is. I, from now on, moving forward, will not use his name. You will not see his picture or video on any of my news stories. And again, I'm not being critical of anyone else. Everybody makes their own decisions. It is just my decision that I'm not going to add to the celebrity of this man who did this, or at least is accused of doing some of these things related to it. And we'll see what charges he faces in the future. But certainly as a person of interest, and may well face charges later, but he will be described that way by me. Person of interest, person facing charges. You will not see his name written again. You will not ever see his name or video in any of my news stories. It's a decision I have made not to add to his celebrity. I don't know if it's the right or the wrong decision, but that's how I'm going to handle this story from here on end. I do want to mention that there's a move in the Indiana General Assembly, which continues to meet now for at least a few more days and weeks, to pass a measure called Hailey's Law. Now, Hailey's Law, as I understand it, is aimed at trying to fill some gaps in the Amber Alert system, to send alerts out where they would not be sent out under current guidelines. You know, I'm no expert in this area. I don't know enough to know whether this would be a good or bad idea. I do know that Hailey's family is behind it, and I know they have only the best intentions. So my hope is that our state lawmakers look at this carefully. If it is a good idea, if it would be helpful, let's do it. If not, let's study it some more. So again, I think we need to redouble our efforts to educate our young people on how to behave online, how to react when people engage with them online. I will write about this, do podcasts on this to the extent that I can find people willing to talk about it. So far, I've tried and have not been terribly successful. But there will be some seminars. It's a seminar the school system is going to put on. So I will try to pass along what I can find out from the experts on this. By the way, if my voice sounds a little different, weather does this to my voice, so I apologize if my voice doesn't sound as it always does. We just have to deal with this, especially a man of my age. This is another item of news this week. It's the annual State of the City address given by Mayor Fadness. He did address the Hailey Buzbee situation as well, but he mentioned a number of things. He went through a long list of his accomplishments. Don't blame him. He has a lot that he can crow about and be proud of doing here. But he also mentioned that, Chicken and Pickle, there was a lot of excitement when they were coming to Fisher's, and a very important and well-known chain of restaurants and facilities. However, they made the decision not to come to Fisher's after all. The mayor said that that space, which is obviously going to be valuable, will be part of a luxury hotel and retail. We don't really know anything more than that. A lot of local media has played that up. I didn't report much on it because there's really not much to say, but it will be a positive thing. And we knew something like that was likely to go in there, something important. That is a valuable piece of real estate right now near the Fisher's Event Center. But in my story that I wrote about the State of the City address, the mayor covered a lot of territory in that. I zeroed in on something he has talked to me about ever since I've known him. So I first met him when he was town manager in Fisher's, candidate for mayor, and of course, taking over the mayor's office in 2015. His view on the cycle of a city, where a city can take that jump up, or the shiny new object, one of the best places to live in America, and Fisher's has been on that list for years and continues to be on these lists, Money Magazine and all the major ones. And I think his concern is he's seen other cities take that step upward and then get into a lull or an area of complacency. And I think he wants to fight this area of complacency. He's always had the opinion that the city is either moving forward or backward. There really is no way to stay where you are. If you are, you really are going backward in his view. So I think you'll be seeing some work with his city council and his staff to work on fighting any complacency, to keep, in his view, Fisher's moving forward from here on, and we'll see where that goes. My wife Jane and I took some time to go to Florida last week. That's why I had a kind of a generic Friday with Fisher's last week. But I knew I'd be out of town. But it was even cold in Florida when I was down there, at least for them. And we've had some really tough winter weather of late. In fact, as I'm speaking now, it's snowing here on February 6th as I record this. But I feel that we need to just find a way to deal with this. I know it's very tough on the teachers and the parents and the families when you have e-learning days, when you have, trying to learn this distance learning thing you have to do when you can't get to the school building because of the weather. It's tough on everybody. But I have to give credit to the city crews, for the school system, for doing the best they can in dealing with a very tough situation. Let's hope that our weather moderates soon. My guest this week is local business owner Casey Harrison, and that's coming up. Today's episode of Larry in Fisher's is brought to you by Citizens State Bank. For over 150 years, Citizens State Bank has been committed to the communities they're rooted in, providing more than just banking services and products, but a true community partner dedicated to giving back and supporting our community's growth. How? By making sure you and your local business owners have the products, tools, and expertise you need to thrive. In addition to everyday checking and savings accounts, Citizens State Bank offers a selection of business and personal financing products, plus a team of local experienced lenders who are as invested in your success as you are and committed to helping you secure the right financing for your needs. Skip the call centers and hold music and get the friendly hometown service you deserve, the modern digital banking tools you expect, and relationships that grow with you, whether you're running a business or managing everyday finances. You can visit Citizens State Bank's Fisher's branch inside the Thomas A. Weaver Municipal Complex at 9 Municipal Drive, Suite 5, or learn about it more online. mycsbin.com/Larry. That's mycsbin.com/Larry. Thanks to Citizens State Bank. member FDIC and equal housing lender, for supporting local news and the Fishers community. I'd like to welcome Casey Harrison to Fridays with Larry. She's the owner of Polished Strategic Communications. She's been an associate faculty member of IU Indianapolis, once known as IUPUI. She's spent time as the assistant director of public relations for the city of Fishers, actually a couple of different tenures there. She's done marketing and communications for the Indy Chamber. She's worked for Well Done Marketing before creating her own business. So, Casey Harrison, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Larry. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Yeah, long time. We haven't really had talked for a while. When I reached out to you, we had a real good conversation just the day before. But I want to get into what you do because you spent your professional career in marketing and communications. And that business has changed so much during the time you spent in this space. So let's start off with this. What has changed the most in the work that you do in the past several years?
Well, I think the industry has transformed completely. I mean, when we look at whether it's marketing, PR, digital strategy, the integration of all of them, the industry landscape and the way that we actually tactically do this work, do these roles is completely different. And so it's a very exciting time. It's been a very exciting time, I'd say most specifically over the last, decade, navigate all of the new ways that we do storytell and that we do communicate, and maybe most importantly, that we do build community. I think for me, it's been fascinating to go from corporate and really feeling like that was going to be my trajectory, is just working my way up and hopefully finding work that I loved. And now, to everyone's surprise and most of all mine, being a business owner, it wasn't a part of the plan, and it's a little bit of a different role, and that I'm doing the work and I'm building the actual organization. But I feel really fortunate. It's been very organic, and I just all of the experiences have built in a way that it makes a lot of sense that I'm doing what I'm doing today.
I want to talk about that decision. Before I do that, though, I found it interesting that, when I worked in the media and ages ago in the 70s, there were very few ways you could get your message out. You could go on TV, radio, newspapers, certain other publications. Today, the number of platforms you can use to get your client's message out is very different. We didn't have local news websites and podcasts like I do. How has all that changed as far as how you look at a certain client and say, how do you get your message out? Which platform do you use?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, if I had a silver bullet for that, I think I'd probably put myself either out of work or into the billionaires category. But I think ultimately, like it's really reiterated the importance of knowing who you're talking to and where they're consuming media. Because to your point, we are fragmented now. We have certain generations that won't participate in certain platforms, and we have other generations who only trust certain platforms. And what used to be the traditional method of we send a press release and wait for people to call and be interested is no longer how we share stories. And so for me and for my clients, I'm always thinking about who do we need to get this message to and what do we want them to do with it. And those decisions really help drive all of the placements that need to be in line to reach those audiences.
I been doing what I do. I've been doing this since 2012 on the blog side and the podcast since 2016. And not a lot, not as much as other platforms, but I do get pitched by people stories all the time. Sometimes I could use them. Sometimes I have to politely say, no, I'm sorry, but think of me next time. But isn't it interesting that it wasn't that many years ago when a podcast wasn't even around? I mean, I remember when my daughters had iPods, eons ago, when the iPods went out, I thought, well, podcasting is gone. Then the cell phone came in, and okay, podcasting is a big deal again. So
Mhm.
I'm curious how you deal with these different people who run these platforms when you're trying to pitch your client's message.
Well, at the end of the day, like I do this work I really care about people. I mean, that's been the impetus of my whole career. And it's also probably been, the people who have invested in me throughout my career are probably all part of the reason why I've been able to achieve what I have today. And so I really fall back on like relationships are always going to be the priority for communications as an industry. And that also goes to some of the values of polished. Like we're at a time where misinformation and clickbait are at an all-time high. And I think conscious consumerism requires conscious partners and conscious PR partners who are pitching things that are accurate, are relevant, and make the world a better place. And so that's a little bit of a glass half full answer, but I would say like it's really important at Polished that we're working with clients and that we're working with media partners that are aligned in the type of mission aligned work that we're doing.
Casey, there's a new phrase I've been seeing and hearing lately. It's called how should I put this? IA slop. In other words, it's something out there. It's been created through artificial intelligence, but it's either not true or just created out of thin air.
Mhm.
And with the technology moving ahead, it's getting a little scary. You probably have clients who might have been impacted by this. I mean, how do you counter something like that where your clients maybe being attacked or
Mhm.
unfairly, shown some way when somebody's made up something, some kind of IA, you know, uh, video or some other sort
Yeah.
of product. What do you do in a case like that? This is all
Yeah.
new technology.
It's all new technology. I think what I'm seeing and what I'm leading, seeing, and maybe observing as an industry is that we're seeing more organizations build their own communication communities. And that means that they're investing in developing their own podcasts. They're creating YouTube short playlists consistently. They're making sure that the microphone and the messaging is quite literally in their hands. And to be honest, it always reminds me of what happened during the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, I was in agency and I was working with some healthcare companies in Indianapolis. And at that time, we immediately saw video messaging and email marketing become the two most effective ways to get information out to the public. And our assumption at the time, and now the data can tell us, years out from that, is that the organization's pages were trusted most because they were considered verified and credible sources. And so in this age where misinformation is easy, and if you have my voice, you might be able to engineer my voice, it's really, really important that again that media partners, that PR partners, that we're all working on placements that are accurate and that are housed in places where our listeners, our readers can trust the outlet.
I'm curious about this because I hear a lot of different stories, and I like your view on this. Do you use in your work artificial intelligence?
I do. I use pieces of it, to be honest. I found that it's a beautiful research tool and it's a great way to quickly. I do a lot of data. Like I like to sort through data. I like to read trends. I like to be able to validate things nationally. And then we have an approach at Polish where because we do such hyper local work, keeping a pulse on those national trends gives us an opportunity to provide local perspectives, which is both helpful for our clients and sometimes for our national media partners. And so I like some of the AI tools and specifically some of the newer research AI tools that are coming online that are able to really aggregate data and help you identify and vet primary sources faster. But in terms of like day to day use, I'm still a little leery. I don't feel like we're clear exactly on even like from a legality standpoint, best practices for AI. And I'll be honest, I've tested AI against, I'm a writer. You know this, Larry, because you've worked with me, but the listeners may not. I enjoy writing. I've been writing for many, many years, and I do a lot of ghost writing for clients and subject matter experts from coast to coast. And I've found that when I write and I put my writing up against AI, it's not the same. And so there's really a quality issue for me in some of these tools. However, that's not to say there aren't pieces of the tools that can be really helpful in making you more efficient.
Casey, there's a term that the AI engineers use. It's called hallucination. And I've played around with AI, and what I found is that sometimes AI and I've heard this from one of the experts, it's designed to please you, and sometimes it will try to please you so much it will make things up to please you.
Mhm.
So I think what I have found in playing around with it is that it will make things up. So you're right. If you're writing, even if you ask it to polish your writing or to write something you can work on, you have to check every fact out because you cannot rely
Yeah.
on what AI tells you. And I think that's the great danger right now, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And I think what I'm maybe most curious to watch is the impact that AI has specifically on communication and marketing. Because I think there are a lot of small teams or businesses that have really tight budgets. And we know that, a lot of federal funding has shifted in the last year, let's call it. And so the first team or the first player that's usually cut is the communications or marketing person because that budget is tight and that role is maybe not understood. And so my hope is that companies are not under the misnomer that they can replace that human expertise and that qualified educated person with AI, but I do think that's going to have to shake itself out a little bit.
I want to get to something you mentioned earlier because if you look at your resume, you've worked for city, you've worked for Chamber of Commerce, you've worked for a marketing firm. I mean, nothing's perfectly safe, but fairly safe work. I mean, it's a steady job. You
Mhm.
made that decision. You took that plunge to start your own business. Talk about how you reached that decision to do that.
Yeah, well, in my case, it really felt like the universe or my faith, my God made that decision for me. Like I had a fantastic career in the corporate space. I'd quite literally made it to the 19th floor corner office. And as a single mom at a very young age, like that felt like the pinnacle. I had arrived. It was security, it was stability, and ultimately, despite having a really successful 2.5 years, that role ended very unexpectedly. And I found myself very unsure about what was next, but also despite not having had the success in the role that I really wanted as a person, as a professional, I really felt very validated that my skill set was successful. We had 3-digit percentage increases on earned no budget year over year. I mean, there were some really good indicators that the work was there. And so as I started thinking about what was next, I thought, let me just do some consulting projects. Let me see if I like this. I was very accustomed to variety. I mean, I'm somebody who's always had a job and a side hustle or a job and two side hustles. And so I'm used to working hard. I'm used to working agile. I'm used to working quickly. And it took about 3 weeks until I had 12 projects and I started doing the math. And after talking with my family, I really felt like I could do more work for myself that supports the causes and the world that I want to live in than I could do if I went back into an organization and had to be in that corporate structure. So I feel really thankful that this has been the journey. But I mean, I don't want to like brush over the fact that being an entrepreneur is a completely different skill set, and building a business, scaling a business, growing yourself and your clientele as you're trying to grow a business. I mean, those are all muscles I'm still very much learning to flex, and I'm thankful for the support around me, but we are still very much learning in this phase.
So, if someone wishes to polish their communications and talk to Casey Harrison, how do you get in touch with Casey Harrison?
I'm very findable, Larry. You can find me on all the social media platforms. Specifically, my favorites are LinkedIn and Instagram. Also, our website is polishedcomms.com.
Casey Harrison, the owner of Polished Strategic Communications. Casey, thanks for your time and best of luck to you in the future.
Thank you, Larry.
A couple of final notes this week. There's been a lot in the news about the Epstein files. I've seen a lot of finger pointing. Democrats saying it's a Republican problem, Republicans saying it's a Democrat problem, left saying it's the right's problem, the right saying it's the left's problem. When I take a look at what we know publicly about the Epstein files, what I get from that something a little different. I see this as a problem of the elite, and the elite could be from the left, right, Democrat, Republican. When you're part of the elite, there is this feeling that you have privilege. And I just get the feeling, this cringy feeling, when I read about these Epstein files, that it's this idea that we're privileged. We get to do things other people don't get to do. And some of these things are pretty awful that were going on. And we're seeing in Britain, the former ambassador to the United States, who was a lord in the House of Lords, has been kicked out of the House of Lords. I think he's resigning, but he did that before they kicked him out. We're seeing international consequences here. And there are some people with very famous names who are being ensnared in this. And I think what I see in Epstein is not a crisis of the left, right, Republican, Democrat. I see it as a crisis of people who feel they have privilege, and that privilege is being exposed, that elitism is being exposed. So to me, that's what I take away from this. One last final word about journalism. We talked about local journalism being in tough situations. I've tried in my small way to fill the gap where I live. But national news is taking its hits too. Look at CBS News. The new, really broadcast news, starting with radio and then into TV, was invented by CBS in many ways because there wasn't much real journalism going on in radio and later TV in its early days. People like Edward R. Murrow in radio and television. Walter Cronkite, a man who was a wire service reporter in World War II, went to work for CBS News and helped make it what it became as one of the most respected news organizations in America as a broadcast news outlet. It's lost its journalistic integrity, and I think that's sad. And I don't think it's a matter of liberal or conservative. It's just a matter of losing the fact that you are trying to get to the facts and at least to the best way you can get to it, the truth. And nobody can get to a perfect truth in journalism. You get to the best version of truth you can get when you work in journalism. And I always felt CBS News did its best to try. They weren't always successful. Hey, the mainstream media is taking its lumps. It isn't perfect, never has been. But when you are looking for straight information, there's a crisis, a 9/11 war outbreak. You want to know where to go to get the best available truth that you can find out there. And you don't want it tainted by any kind of advocacy or bias. You want to make sure you're getting journalists trying to dig for the facts and get to the people who are consuming their news product. So that's why what's happening at the Washington Post concerns me. 30% of the staff is gone. They've lost most, if not all, their news department. They say they want to be more national security intelligence news, but they're closing their international bureaus. And how do you report on those issues when you don't have international reporters? So what's happening at the Post is very sad to see. One of our great journalistic institutions is being gutted as we see. I think it's sad. The more journalism we have, the better, and we're seeing less today. And for me, that's a sad day in America. Unfortunately, I'm not leaving you on a good news note, but that's the way I feel about things. And I will be back, if all goes well, next week with another Fridays with Larry. So thanks for being here. Be safe and be kind. And once again, thanks to Citizens State Bank for sponsoring this episode of Fridays with Larry. Learn more about their business and personal banking options at mycsbin.com/Larry. Or stop by their Fishers branch at the Thomas A. Weaver Municipal Complex. Thanks again to Citizens State Bank, member FDIC and equal housing lender, for supporting local journalism in Fishers.